Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about rhythm and meter and what they mean. Are you ready? Here we go. So when we talk about rhythm, we're talking about the patterns of sound within a piece of poetry or any piece of language. It's the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables that we use as we speak. Meter is our term for the way that we measure those stressed and unstressed syllables. So we almost use the two interchangeably, but meter is the more carefully measured form and rhythm is the more natural form. Now, studying rhythm can be fairly difficult at times because it's pretty nuanced. When we talk about stressed and unstressed syllables, we don't mean that all syllables are equally stressed or equally unstressed. In fact, no two are really alike, just the way no two people are really alike. Therefore, we're really talking about relative stress, or how stressed they are in comparison to the other syllables around them. And this can get a little hairy. I'm going to try to talk about it in the simplest terms that I can, and also give you some suggestions for how to pay attention to stress and unstressed syllables. But if you want a much more nuanced and complex look at sound in poetry, I highly recommend this book, Robert Pinsky's The Sound of Poetry, A Brief Guide. It's phenomenal, and he looks at some of the more nuanced aspects of poetic rhythm. When talking about meter, there's really three things we need to talk about. Number one, what are stressed and unstressed syllables? Number two, how can stressed and unstressed syllables be arranged into meaningful units? And number three, how many units makes up a line of poetry? Once we understand those three things, we can begin to scan or mark the rhythm of a line of poetry. Okay, so let's start by defining stressed and unstressed syllables. A syllable, of course, is a unit of sound within a word. Some words are monosyllabic, which means they have one syllable to them, like me, or Bob, or cow. And some words are polysyllabic, which means they have multiple syllables to them, like indefatigable, or unconstitutional. Some of the syllables that we say when we speak have more emphasis than others, and it's that emphasis that we're measuring when we talk about accented versus unaccented. For the most part, monosyllabic nouns, verbs, and adjectives carry an accent, like bob, tree, go, red. Those all tend to be accented. Helping verbs, being verbs, and suffixes don't usually have accent, like can go, eaten. Possessive pronouns aren't usually strongly accented. His car accented, not his. And if a word has more than one syllable, you gotta kind of play around with it to figure it out. Or, as a shortcut, you could look it up in a dictionary and see which ones are marked as accented. Pugnacious, not pugnacious. So there are a few ways that you can judge how accented a syllable is. One is to have a really good ear for it. Some people are just naturally rhythmically inclined and have sharp ears. They also make good rappers. A trick I learned a long time ago is to take your hand and place it under your jaw as you're talking. If you feel your jaw go down more, it's probably an accented syllable. And so you can kind of feel some of the more accented syllables. Doesn't always work, but it's a little bit of a hint. Okay, so accented, unaccented. When we're talking about meter, we call this stressed versus unstressed syllables. And so this pattern of stressed and unstressed sound is rhythm. And the measurement of that rhythm is meter. When marking stressed and unstressed syllables in poetry, we usually indicate them with a U for an unstressed syllable and an accent or a slash for a stressed syllable. Simply writing these marks over the syllables in the line helps us to be able to see the patterns of stressed and unstressed syllables. Okay, if we can get a feel for the stressed versus the unstressed syllables, we can begin to organize those into meaningful units. We can talk about organizing stressed and unstressed syllables into meaningful units by talking about the number of syllables in a unit. It's either going to be in 2 syllables or in 3 syllables, and they can really fall in any sort of combination. Also, whether we start with a stressed or an unstressed makes a difference. Something that starts unstressed and works its way towards stressed is going to be called a rising rhythm. Something that starts stressed and works its way to unstressed is going to be called a falling rhythm. So, these are the basic patterns of stressed and unstressed syllables. The first is a 2-syllable rhythm. It starts with an unstressed syllable and is followed by a stressed syllable. Ba-bum. This is called an iamb, and it's the most famous kind of rhythm in English poetry. Often poetry goes ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. Whose woods these are I think I know. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? This is, of course, a rising rhythm. The opposite rhythm, which starts with a stressed syllable and ends with an unstressed syllable, is called a trochee, or trochaic rhythm. Double, double, toil and trouble. On the other hand, we can have 3-syllable patterns. What happens if we have unstressed, unstressed, stressed? Have you marked but the fall of the snow? Ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-bum. This is called an anapest, or anapestic rhythm. The opposite, again, would be an accented followed by 2 unaccented. Woman much missed how you call to me, call to me. Bum ba ba bum ba ba bum ba ba bum ba ba. It's like a waltz. Bum ba ba bum ba ba bum ba ba bum ba ba. Dee lee 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 dee 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 lee lee lee. This is called a dactyl or dactylic rhythm. It's really hard to keep a dactyl up in English. We just don't have the rhythm for it. Finally, there are 2 other units of measurement we might use, but we don't usually have a whole line of them. They're used more when we insert an irregularity into a pattern. The first is to have 2 accented syllables back to back. Bum bum. This is called a spondee or a spondaic rhythm. The second is to have 2 unstressed syllables back to back. We call this a Pyrrhic or Pyrrhic rhythm. Some people say that the line in Shakespeare's Sonnet 18, "And often is his gold complexion dimmed," includes a Pyrrhic, "and often is his gold complexion dimmed." There's an extra unstressed syllable in there. And also in Shakespeare's Sonnet 130, there's an extra stress. "If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head." It's an irregularity, and it changes things up. A careful poet might add a break in the rhythm or a change in the rhythm to cause a certain effect in the reader. Either to speed up a line, to slow a line down and make it more deliberate, or simply to throw a reader off and make the reader stop and think more. We call these units of measurement for rhythm feet. This little iamb went to market. This little trochee stayed home. So an iambic foot is a ba-bum. Now that we have the basic list of metrical feet or units, iambs, trochees, anapests, dactyls, spondees, and pyrrhices, we can talk about how many beats show up in a line. So since meter is our term for measuring the number of units in a line, or the number of feet in a line, we also use that term within our terms for the number of beats in a line. So if we have 1 beat in a line, 1 mono and meter, it's monometer. 2 feet in a line, dimeter. 3 feet in a line, trimeter. 4 feet, tetrameter. 5 feet, pentameter. You've probably heard that one before, right? Because the most famous line of poetry is 5 beats of ba-bum, or iambs. So, iambic pentameter, 5 ba-bums. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day, when I have fears that I might cease to be, etc., etc. You can also have more beats than that in a line. Hexameter, septameter, octameter, etc. So John Donne's song, "Go and catch a falling star, get with child a mandrake root," that's a clear example of trochaic trimeter. Or listen to The Destruction of Sennacherib by Byron. "The Assyrian came down like a wolf on the fold, and his cohorts were gleaming in purple and gold, and the sheen on his spears was like stars in the sea. Ba-ba-bum, 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 ba-ba-bum." It's anapestic tetrameter. This is all kind of challenging, and you might be saying, why does this matter? It matters because the more control you have over the sound, and the more playing with sound you do, the more meaning the structure of the poem can have for the reader. Even a poem that doesn't have a careful pattern of rhythm is still going to have stressed and unstressed syllables and is going to create certain sound effects for the reader. The way those sounds hit us influences the way we feel as we read this poem. A lot of stressed syllables in a row will hit us hard. A lot of unstressed syllables in a row will make us kind of run forward. A sudden change in rhythmic pattern catches us off guard or adds a lot of emphasis to what's being said. So let's recap. Rhythm is the meaningful arrangement of stressed and unstressed syllables in a line of poetry or speech. Meter is the way we measure the beats in that line. A unit of measurement made up of stressed and unstressed syllables is called a foot. The 6 kinds of feet we talked about are iambs and trochees, which are 2-syllable feet, anapests and dactyls, which are 3-syllable feet, and spondees and pyrrhices, which are those irregular 2-syllable feet. The iambs are made up of an unstressed and a stressed syllable. The trochee is made up of a stressed and an unstressed syllable. The anapest is made up of an unstressed unstressed, stressed syllable. The dactyl is made up of a stressed, unstressed syllable. The spondee is 2 stresses in a row, and the pyrrhus is 2 unstressed syllables in a row. Then we talked about the number of feet in a line. We simply count the number of those units in the line and measure that out. So maybe we have 5 iambs in a row, and we call that iambic pentameter. Maybe we have 4 anapests in a row, and we call that anapestic tetrameter. Maybe we have 6 trochees in a row, and we call that trochaic hexameter. So let's go back to one of the beloved Robert Frost poems, Stopping by Woods at a Snowy Eve. Whose woods these are, I think I know. Can you hear the iambs there? Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. How many are in there? Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. Whose woods these are, I think I know. There are 4 of them, so it's iambic tetrameter. If you still feel a little bit overwhelmed by all of this, I recommend practicing. Listen to lots of poetry, read a lot of it out loud, maybe hold your hand under your chin while you're doing so and try to count the rhythm. Get a feel for it. Start with poetry that's pretty heavily rhythmic and see where you go from there. Maybe you'll practice really hard and truly master this and become a master of rhythm. Or maybe you'll just get a little bit more comfortable with the idea of rhythm. Either way, it's still a useful practice. And if you're going to write your own poetry and have that control over that poetic sound and the way the poem comes across to your reader, understanding rhythm is a must. Thanks for watching. Tune in next time and we'll talk about another literary term. For now, you can click over here on some of the links, or you can click to subscribe. Have a great week.